folks. This is All Minus One Story Time with your favorite host, Bill. How are we doing today? So, guys, we are going to continue with the reading of Nihilism, the Root of the Revolution of the Modern Age by Eugene. Father Seraphim Rose. All right, guys. So, I am going to be releasing two parts of this today. This is part 2. The first part would have been out at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then this part should be premiering at 7 p.m. so folks can have some time to watch the first part. And I'm just going to cover the introduction. Part 1 was the editor's preface. So let's go. So, introduction. The question of truth. What is the nihilism in which we have seen the root of the revolution of the modern age? The answer, at first thought, does not seem difficult. Several obvious examples of it spring immediately to mind. There is Hitler's fantastic program of destruction, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Dadaist attack on art. There is the background from which these movements sprang, most notably represented by several possessed individuals of the late 19th century, poets like Rimbaud and, oh man, I'm not going to try it, Bollier, yeah, revolutionaries like Bakunin and Nietzsche. What's the heck? I'm not even going to try and pronounce these guys. That is how names go, right? Prophets like Nietzsche. There is, on a humbler level among our contemporaries, the vague unrest that leads some to flocks to magicians like Hitler, and others to find escape in drugs or false religion, or to perpetuate those senseless crimes that become even more characteristic of these times. But these represent no more than the secular surface of the problem of nihilism. To account even for these, once one probes beneath the surface, it is by no means an easy task, but the task we have set for ourselves in this chapter is broader, to understand the nature of the whole movement of which these phenomena are but extreme examples. To do this, it will be necessary to avoid two great pitfalls lying on either side of the path we have chosen, into one or the other of which most commentators on the nihilist spirit of our age have fallen: apology and diatribe. Anyone aware of the two obvious imperfections and evils of modern civilization that have been the more immediate occasion and cause of the nihilistic reaction, though we shall see that these two have been the fruit of an incipient nihilism, cannot but feel a measure of sympathy with some, at least of the men who have participated in that reaction. Such sympathy may take the form of pity from men who may, from one point of view, be seen as innocent victims of the conditions against them which their efforts has been directed. This would be your MGTOW types, folks. This is what he's talking about. Right? In today's words, this was written back in the 1960s, so we're talking about a 60-year-old document here. This is what we can express it as today. Those folks who are blaming women for everything and not taking radical ownership of their lives and saying, no, it's my fault for picking that bad woman. And guys, I could say this because I've looked myself in the mirror and I did exactly that when I was a young man. And I did that for a long time afterwards. Now that I'm out of that nihilism, now that I have Christ, I have an amazing wife. Absolutely phenomenal. She's a beautiful woman who has a beautiful spirit. She's such a sweetheart. Everybody loves her when they meet her. She's just a wonderful person, and she puts up with me, guys. That's I put up with her too. But look, guys, I'm not like hard to get along with at all. But I'm certainly a particular individual. So you count your blessings for what you have. And what I had before wasn't good. And it all had to do with me not living up to Christ and not really being a man. Just being a little boy still, just being a kid. So let's get back to this. It says, nihilism cannot but feel a measure of sympathy with some, at least, of the men who have participated in its reaction. Such sympathy may take the form of pity for men who may, from one point of view, be seen as innocent victims of the conditions against which their effort has been directed. Or again, it may be expressed in the common opinion that certain types of nihilistic phenomenon have actually a positive significance and have a role to play in some new development of history or of man, and that would be your postmodernist types. The latter attitude, again, is itself one of the more obvious fruits of the very nihilism in question here. But the former attitude, at least, is not entirely devoid of truth or justice. Exactly what I was saying. The problem is those guys, those folks wrapped up into that get nihilistic because the world is pitted against them, don't understand that there's an out. There's an out to this, folks. And it has to do with renewing your mind, having the proper spiritual outlook. For that very reason, however, we must be all the more careful not to give an undue importance. It is all too easy in the atmosphere of intellectual fog that pervades liberal and humanist circles today to allow sympathy for an unfortunate person to pass over into receptivity of his ideas. Yes, amen, brother, exactly. I feel pity for this person, therefore, these ideas are good. What does the left currently teach? Victimhood culture. The nihilist, to be sure, is in some sense sick, and his sickness is a testimony to the sickness of an age whose best as well as worst elements turn to nihilism. But sickness is not cured, nor even properly diagnosed by sympathy. In any case, there is no such thing as an entirely innocent victim. Amen. The nihilist is all too obviously involved in the very sins of guilt of mankind that have produced the evils of our age. What do the SJWs say? We're all complicit. Silence is violence. All of those things. You're white, therefore you're racist automatically because somehow the melatonin in your skin, the density of that, interacts with your brain and makes you a racist. No, it doesn't. But this is what they peddle, folks. Let me read this again. The nihilist is all too obviously involved in the very sins and guilt of mankind that have produced the evils of our age, and in taking arms, as do all nihilists, not only against real or imagined abuses and injustices in the social and religious order, but also against order itself and the truth that underlines that order. The nihilist takes an active part in the work of Satan, for such it is, that can by no means be explained away by the mythology of innocent victim. That's right, and all Satan has as a tool is a lie, and these folks lie to themselves. No one, in the last analysis, serves Satan against his will. And people like to lie to themselves for various reasons, but the main one is to avoid responsibility. It's really the biggest reason. And if you can avoid responsibility, then you can get sympathy for being a victim and yada, yada, yada. It so perpetuates the cycle. But if apology is far from our intention in these pages, neither is our aim mere diatribe. It is not sufficient, for example, to condemn Nazis or Bolshevism for their barbarism, gangsterism, or anti-intellectualism, and the artistic or literary avant-garde for their pessimisms or exhibitionisms, nor is it enough to defend the democracies in the name of civilization, progress, or humanity for their advocacy of private property or civil liberties. Such arguments, while some of them possess a certain justice, are really quite beside the point. The blows of nihilism strike too deep. Its program is far too radical to be effectively countered by them. Nihilism has error for its root, and error can be conquered only by truth. This guy sounds like it just sounds like something I would write. And I'm actually a much more effective writer than I am a speaker. It just takes more time to write, guys, than to run my mouth. So, but yeah, 1000%. Most of the criticisms of nihilism is not directed to this root at all. And the reasons for this, as we shall see, is that nihilism has become, in our time, so widespread and pervasive, has entered so thoroughly and so deeply into the minds and hearts of all men living today, that there is no longer any front on which it may be fought. And those who think they are fighting it are most often using its own weapons, which they, in effect, turn against themselves. Again, these are the black-pilled folks. How many of them argue with maybe some of your favorite YouTubers or streamers, whatever? Argue. And, well, but you got to understand that we can't do anything. And I've had this argument. Well, the central banks, they run everything. I agree. Can't use the central banks, buddy. Got to make our own stuff. Got to do our own systems. The book of Revelation tells me this. It says no man will be able to buy or sell. I don't need to believe that happens at the end of some time. That is applicable all throughout history and has happened before, folks. What do you think a cake baker who would not sell to a homosexual? Actually, they would. They just wouldn't do a specific greeting on their cake. What do you think that is? That no man may buy or sell. What do you think cancel culture is? What do you think being deplatformed is? What do you think the banks, many banking agencies, PayPal, a pay service not allowing folks because of their politics is? That no man may buy or sell. Get real with yourself. Understand your position. Understand the strategy that you must implement within that position. Because you can have no strategy or tactics until you understand the reality you live in. And I can promise you, folks, once you understand that, there is great hope. There is great hope. You just have to be able to see things proactively instead of constantly being on your heels and reacting. You know, someone who studied martial arts for 30 years of my life and absolutely loves boxing, especially dirty boxing with knees and elbows and all that fun stuff. Anyways, like headbutts. Yeah. Anyways, I really don't like beating up people, but training's fun. It's a good male masculine bonding, right? I'm telling you right now, you want to get someone on their heels. You want to get someone backing up on their feet, running away. It's easier for me to not only knock you out, but control the fight that way. It is the person that is pushing forward that controls the pace of everything. And who is constantly pushing forward? The left. The left pushes forward and the right merely reacts. Well, no more, folks. It's time to stop reacting, and it's time to start being proactive while we still have a chance. Because I'm telling you, there are a few years before the real purges come. I don't mean the social media purges. I don't mean the othering, the unplatforming, the banking issues, right? That I just spoke of. No. I mean the calling. The calling of those of wrong think. Fortunately, the left does this to themselves to some degree. We, most of us, aren't authoritarian, so we don't go and take a direct fight to them, nor do I advocate for that. No. What I'm advocating for, of course, is that we unite on our own, and we create our own communities, and when they come for us, we have strength because we have numbers. Right now, the right is scattered everywhere, completely weak. A house divided cannot stand, folks. We need to stop arguing. We need to start uniting. It's like I talked about libertarians before. I'm going to have Adam Kolkesh on the show actually very soon, and on the Ends Justify the Memes, my other channel, the live show. And you know, he doesn't support Trump. I get it. I believe in standing on principle, so I don't chide him on that. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of libertarians and I know a lot in many nonprofit type circles, didn't like Trump because he wasn't their perfect candidate. I'm sorry, guys. What's more important, your perfect candidate or fighting the leftists who want to enslave you? Literally. Take everything from you. They want to take your religion from you, folks. They think you're an evil person for believing in God. This is no joke. I've been studying this for 15 years. God put it in my heart as a young man to study. Let's get back to the text. Let's see, where did I leave off here? It says, nihilism has become, in our time, so widespread and pervasive, has entered so thoroughly and so deeply into the minds and hearts of all men living today, that there is no longer any form on which it may be fought. And those who think they are fighting it are most often using its own weapons, which they, in effect, turn against themselves. Some will, perhaps, object once they have seen the scope of our project, that we have set our net too wide, that we have exaggerated the prevalence of nihilism, or, if not, then that the phenomenon is so universal as to defy handling at all. We must admit that our task is an ambitious one, all the more so because of the ambiguity of many nihilist phenomena. And indeed, if it were to attempt a thorough examination of question, our work will never end. It is possible, however, to set our net wide and still catch the fish we are after, because it is, after all, a single fish and a large one. I kind of want to go back to that never end point real quick, because I just made a quick shot about this. This is the story of time, folks. Again, proper mindset, understanding in this material world, to some degree, the world wins. In the end, though, God wins. So understand that. You will be persecuted. You will be beat down. You will be mocked. No one will listen to you. Don't worry. Keep faith and have hope in God. Trust me, it all works out in the end for you, no matter how horrible it seems in this life. A good person to read, which I'll probably get into to some degree. I doubt we'll read the whole Gulag Archipelago, but considering it's massive, guys. But Solzhenitsyn, who I'm a big fan of, talked about this when he was in the gulags, that the Christians, the people who had true faith, they were the only ones that you could not destroy their resolve of steel, constantly at peace. We see this in the writings of ancient Romans, folks who were tortured to death, to the point to deny Christ, and they never would deny Christ, would go to their death. The Romans wrote about this. They said that a true Christian, you cannot get them to deny Christ. They will not confess that Caesar is king and their God. Only a fake Christian will do such a thing. Those people that Christ never knew. It is possible, however, to set our net wide and still catch many fish. Absolutely. A complete documentation of nihilistic phenomenon is out of question, but an examination of the unique nihilistic mentality that underlies them and of its indisputable effects and its role in contemporary history is surely possible. We shall attempt here first to describe this mentality in several, at least, of the most important manifestations, and offer a sketch of its historical development, and then to probe more deeply into its meaning and historical program. But before this can be done, we must know more clearly of what we are speaking. We must begin, therefore, with a definition of nihilism. Yes, define your terms. Anytime you're having a conversation and people are changing the definition of terms or changing the goalpost on you, you must correct them. I had this the other night on our live show, not purposefully. It was completely unintentional, but our guest of the weekly narrative, Jeremy, kind of switched the goalpost on what we were talking about, and I kind of brought him back to center on that, what we were talking about. But I also acknowledged his point, which was a good point. And that's what you must do. We must stay on track with what we're talking about. The leftists do not do this. Go back, maybe I'll link it at the end of this, to my video about Sololensky and Mao's little red book. In any case, let's keep going. We must understand where nihilism is. But before this can be done, we must know more clearly what we are speaking of. We must begin, therefore, with a definition of nihilism. This task need not detain us long. Nihilism has been defined, and quite succinctly, by the font of philosophical nihilism, Nietzsche. That there is no truth, that there is no absolute state of affairs, no, nothing in itself. This alone is nihilism, and of the most extreme kind. There is no truth. We have encountered this phrase already more than once in this book, and it will reoccur frequently hereafter. For the question of nihilism is, most profoundly, a question of truth. It is indeed the question of truth. Let me read that again, actually. For the question of nihilism is a question of truth. The question of truth. But what is truth? Caesar said this to Christ. What is truth? Very old idea, guys. Nothing new is under the sun. We have not changed, I can guarantee you. The question is, first of all, one of logic. Therefore, we discuss the content of truth. Logic, by the way, logos, that word literally means, we get that from who Christ is. We must examine its very possibility and the condition of its postulation. And by truth we mean, of course, as Nietzsche's denial of it makes explicit, absolute truth, which we have already defined as the dimension of being and the end of things. By the way, folks, he's crapping on Nietzsche a lot, and understandably so. I'm not the biggest fan of Nietzsche, but I do think that Nietzsche's observations were quite important and should be and must be understood. I've talked about Nietzsche before. In fact, the first time I was able to get my OBS to work properly and used it was a PowerPoint slide on Nietzsche and some quotes on the master-slave morality, which I often bring back to. I'll often misspeak and say mentality. More or less, it's the same thing. You have a master-slave morality. Now, I don't agree with all of Nietzsche's points on it. However, he was correct, generally speaking. There are those who are masters of themselves, and there are those who are willing slaves in this world. Let's see. It says, Nietzsche's denial of it makes explicit absolute truth, which we have already defined as the dimension of being and the end of things. Absolute truth. The phrase has to a generation raised on skepticism and unaccustomed to serious thought and antiquated ring. Skepticism, sort of. Not really. We're really not a skeptical nation. In fact, if anyone says anything that's truthful, Skeptic Magazine, let's put it that way. Skeptic Magazine denies all kinds of true realities. And I can't think of the gentleman's name, quite famous, who is the editor-in-chief of that, will often poo-poo on any idea that may be truthful because it's not touted by the mainstream. It's basically like any other fact-checking site. It's nonsense. And it will not explore anything that the hegemony does not agree with. No one surely is the common idea. No one is naive enough to believe in absolute truth anymore. All truth to our enlightened age is relative. The latter expression, let us note, all truth is relative, is a popular translation of Nietzsche's phrase, there is no absolute truth, and one doctrine is the foundation of nihilism alike of the masses and of the elite. And guys, again, this goes back to postmodernism. The French intellectuals created postmodernism, and during the 1960s is when they came to the United States and started throwing this into the university mind. But it has always been there because ideologies, like some sort of spiritual possession, literally take hold of folks. They take a hold of you like a demon, taking a hold of your very being. Relative truth is primarily represented for our age by the knowledge of science, which begins in observation, preceded by logic and progresses in orderly fashion from the knowledge to the unknown. It is always decursive, contingent, cognizant, or cognizant, yes, qualified, always expressed in relation to something else, never standing alone, never categorically, never absolute. The unreflective scientific specialist sees no need for any other kind of knowledge. Notice this unreflected scientific specialist. I talked about this because I was talking about Klaus Schwab's Great Reset, and he mentioned that we are far too focused in. This is very much something I'm against. You need to be a polymath, folks. You need to be a jack of all trades. You can have specialties, but you need to be more than your specialty. An undiversified personality will be destroyed once that singular, monolithic part of that personality is destroyed. You must be willing to have things that can perish and die. It's called redundancy. It's called basically being a well-developed individual. You're not a one-trick pony, right? Occupied with the demands of his specialty, he has perhaps neither time nor inclination for abstract questions that inquire, for example, into the basic presuppositions of that specialty. Again, amen, brother. If you cannot get down to the root of your specialty, but you take it upon high, you cannot get to the first principles. You cannot think through it yourself. There's a problem. And that's what most people are doing who are specialists, who are experts. They're repeating things purely rote. They have memorized it and they believe it and they've never examined it. You know how many biologists, and I mean people with several doctorates in forms of biology later on in the future, come away from evolution because they start actually exploring the questions of evolution that are never answered? The mathematical questions that are completely debunk any part of the idea, other than the adaptation of species. Of course, that happens. Duh. What do you think animal husbandry is? What do you think breeding is? If he is pressed, or if his mind spontaneously turns to such questions, the most obvious explanation is usually sufficient to satisfy his curiosity. All truth is empirical. All truth is relative. I think I'm going to leave it there, guys, for the day. We'll come back to it because this goes on for a while. But it's a good place to stop because we're getting into the unreflected specialist, scientific specialty, and we're at about the 30-minute mark. So I'm really actually excited to keep reading this because this guy's making these quite cogent points, and just it's like I'm reading something I would have wrote myself. And hopefully you are thinking very much the same way. And we must understand that one of the greatest diseases today in this world is nihilism. And I mean, this is what leftism is about, right? They believe the earth is about to die and be destroyed. They do everything that they're doing in order to save their precious Mother Earth in existence. And they're so nihilistic, they will murder anyone and everyone who stands in their way. They have no values. They have no morals. They have no guiding principles. The only guiding principle they have is power, authoritarianism, destruction, evil, death. That's it. You can talk to a leftist. I know plenty of them. My friends, they're maybe not as extreme as others, but in the end, that's really what they believe. What I believe is truth, life, love, creation. Not at all the same thing as their beliefs. Freedom. Like true freedom. You throw me in jail, guys. I promise I will be free. You cannot take my mind from me. And once they have your mind, folks, you're done. Because, see, you always have this. You always have yourself. You always have your soul. But many would strive to take that from you. But, guys, that's about all I have. Let's wrap up there, and I will see you all next time.